Meeting of the Town of Dudley on July 24th of 2023 is now called to order at 7:14 p.m. We've exceeded our quorum requirements this evening with a total of 408, so we will have our meeting. Please stand to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Prior to my welcoming Ms. Smith up to the microphone to begin our meeting officially, just as a reminder about a couple of rules of decorum. First and foremost, there are no hats allowed except for active duty military or uniformed officers who are here this evening per the Dudley Town of Dudley bylaws. Additionally, please be reminded that we will go through some of the procedural guides for this evening, but given the fact that this is a shorter town warrant, I am not going to go through all procedures, but I will highlight some key ones in a little bit. Mrs. Smith, if you could come please certify the delivery of the warrant.
To either of the constables in the town of Dudley and said county, greetings. In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you are hereby directed to notify and warn the inhabitants of the town of Dudley, qualified to vote in elections and town affairs, to meet in the Connie Vinco Galley Auditorium at Shepherd Hill Regional High School, 68 Dudley Oxford Road in said Dudley, on Monday, July 24th, 2023 at 7 p.m., then and there to take action on the following articles.
Thank you. And can you certify the return?
We are hereby directed to serve this warrant, posted attested copies thereof at the Dudley Municipal Center and on the Town of Dudley website, and by posting notice of availability of the warrant on one cable access channel. Warrant to be posted at least 14 days before holding of said meeting. Hereof, fail not and make due return of this warrant with your doing thereon to the town clerk at the time of holding of said meeting. Given under our hands this 29th day of June in the year of 2023. Signed, Kerry J. Siganevich, John Marcy, Mark Landry, Stephen Sullivan, Jason Johnson, Board of Selectmen. I have notified and warned the inhabitants of the town of Dudley by posting up attested copies of the same at the Dudley Municipal Center on the 10th of July, 2023. I also observed and posted on the town's website and notice of availability on the Dudley Cable Access Channel on the 10th of July, 2023. Thereby making my return to the Dudley Town Clerk on the 10th of July, 2023. Signed, Michael Mayotte, Constable.
Thanks very much. Folks who are in the back, if you can make your way down to an open seat, please, just not in the front three rows. All participants in town meeting must be seated. Thank you. So as they're making their way down to the seats, thanks to the community who have joined us tonight. This is a great turnout, and it's always a spirited opportunity for us to continue a great democratic tradition here in the town of Dudley. We do have two warrant articles this evening that we will get into momentarily. But prior to the beginning, we've got just a few reminders regarding procedure and decorum for our town meeting floor. Only residents of the town or agents speaking on behalf of the town departments or in an official capacity related to work in this town may speak. This evening, we have on hand Town Council Michelle Randazzo, who's down here to my left, immediate right of the microphone. As Town Council, we may consult with her off to the side. We may ask her for clarification on any points of law or procedures as well. As a reminder, I addressed this earlier, no hats or hoods allowed. And again, all non-residents of the town are to be seated in the front three rows in our auditorium. In order to speak tonight, please be sure that you are recognized by me. I will get to you, just be patient. If I see a hand on this side that goes up before a hand on this side, I will work my way around the auditorium. No worries there. When you do approach the microphone after being granted permission to speak, please make sure that you state your name and your address so that way it can be recorded into the record. Referring to previous speakers by name is not something that we do here. We go ahead and refer to them as the previous speaker or previous speakers. Please be mindful of that none of this is personal and it is all about the order of our meeting. Questions can be asked through the chair, and if warranted, I will recognize an appropriate party to address the question. Most questions will be addressed to our Board of Selectmen or our FAA. Some questions may be addressed to council, and some may be addressed back to a petitioner of any particular article. Please maintain appropriate decorum throughout the meeting. Cheers and jeers from the audience. That's not a place for town meeting floor. We go ahead and vote with our clickers, as we will go through the tutoring in a little bit. Please make sure we're attentive to a smartly run and smartly taken care of meeting. And I will do my best to adhere to the typical Robert's Rules of Orders that we follow and other rules governing our town meeting as outlined in the Town of Dudley bylaws. I am not perfect by any stretch, and I will go ahead and take feedback if there are questions about any procedural rules that I may unintentionally violate. So it's clicker tutorial time. We'll go ahead through. Everyone, when you've checked in, you should have received a little clicker. Some of you received them and they had lanyards attached to them. Number one is make sure that these get returned on your exit tonight. Number two, to vote yes, you're going to vote by pressing the 1 button, or A, and to vote no, you're going to press the 2 or B button. If you push the wrong button, it's okay. We will have a timer in the lower right-hand side that counts down on the amount of time that we have to complete the vote. It's a reasonable amount of time, so if mistakenly you hit 4D, it's not going to impact your vote until the timer expires. You have an opportunity to hit the 1A or the 2B button to take care of your vote. Response cards do not work outside of this meeting, so please make sure that you do leave them on your exit. We will have collectors at any of the exit doors at the back of the auditorium. I think we're good. So we will go ahead and take a little test question at this point in time. You will answer 1A for yes, 2B for no. The question is today, Monday, July 24, 2023? If you notice on the right-hand side, we've got the timer counting down, and you can enter your vote at any time, number 1 or number 2. And you should have seen a green light up on your keypad when you hit that. Very good, I was not the only one to make an error. Today is in fact the 24th of July. Nice work. Thank you 6% for making me feel cared for and loved. So, without further ado, let's jump on in. Article 1. Let's see. To hear and act on the recommendations of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance, Appropriation, and Advisory Committee, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The FAA recommends that we approve Article 1 as written in the warrant, and I so move.
Motion's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion on Article 1? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move Article 1 to a vote. All in favor, 1. All opposed, 2. If you do get a little button that shows a... Oh, hold on. Hey, we're good. So we're going to go ahead and do that vote. If you did get that no sign with the line crossed out, just please call out right, let me know if you're going to get a vote. All right, that passes with a clear majority. Article 2, FY 2024 Budget and Adjusted Regional School District Appropriation, to see if the town will vote to determine the sums of money the town will raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds to defray the charges and expenses of the town and provide for a reserve fund, determining the compensation for elected officials and including debt and interest for the ensuing fiscal year, beginning on July 1, 2023, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Moderator, the FAA will defer to the Board of Selectmen for a motion.
Thank you. Mr. Siganovich.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town approve Article 2 as printed in the warrant, including the sources and uses of funds included in the warrant, and as updated in Addendum A to the warrant, as recommended by the FAA, totaling $25,244,597 to defray the charges and expenses of the town, provide for a reverse reserve funds, and determine the compensation for elected officers for the ensuing year beginning on July 1st, 2023, including payment of debt and interest, and further to rescind the vote taken and appropriations made under Article 3 of the May 22nd, 2023 annual town meeting.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Just a second, Mr. Breyer. As the petitioner's selectman or FAA, would you like to speak to the article first? All right. I've got a hand next to the mic. Yes, Mr. Breyer, please state your name and address.
John Breyer, 16 Flaxfield Road. It was almost exactly 2 months ago that we were here voting on that 522 budget. And at the time, I said that I was going to vote for the budget and to have the override questions go to the general public, because at a minimum, we needed a budget to function and run our government. And over the last 60 days, there's been a lot of information that has been uncovered to discuss back and forth. And I was at a selectmen meeting 2 weeks ago, and they gave me an enormous amount of time. And again, I was very appreciative and thankful for the professionalism, courtesy, and the discussion we had that night. And during the discussion that night, it was actually Selectman Sullivan that had just saying what happens if the override for the school fails. Because what I was talking to them about was that there was no reason to abandon the 522 budget, and that they shouldn't be operating under a budget that simply doesn't exist, that I call the Armageddon budget now. And he was insisting, well, what if it fails? And so what I had come up with is what's before you today. It's basically, I'm going to be making a motion shortly, but I want to preserve the 522 budget, because in that budget, every department gets more funding. Police, fire. It's the budget that we should be operating under today. And for some reason, we're not. But it's a legitimate concern that Selectman Sullivan had. And so the contingent B, so the contingent A is that it basically accounts for a successful school override vote.
Sorry, Mr. Breyer, we're not discussing anything relative to contingent B and contingent A.
Oh, okay, because I didn't make my motion yet. Okay, so what I would like to do is I move that the town reject the proposed Article 2 as written, and rather amend the already approved 522-2023 FY24 Town of Dudley budget with the following attached changes. Number 1, change the revenue number from the 522-23 budget from $25,182,810 to the most recent revenue number of $25,244,598, as provided by the Board of Selectmen Town Administrator. This change adds $61,788 in additional revenue, which is the addendum A that the Board of Selectmen had introduced this evening. I want to, part 2 of the motion, increase the library budgetary number from the 522 FY24 line item of $360,223 to $370,223 by transferring $10,000 from this newly increased revenue number of $61,788, leaving the $51,788 remaining. Then transfer that $51,788 to the general fund. And then I'd like to add a contingent A column to the 522-2023 approved budget in the event that the August 17, 2023 Prop 2.5 override is successful for the increased school assessment of $901,693 and incorporate the individual department override amounts for all other 8/17/23 Prop 2.5 override questions and their approval, if any. Number 5, I would add a contingent B column to the 522-2023 approved FY24 budget in the event that the August 17, 2023 Prop 2.5 override is not successful for the increased school assessment of $901,693, but still incorporate the individual department override amounts, if any, for all other 8/17/2023 Prop 2.5 override questions and their approval, if any. Number 6, if the school override fails, and the library override fails on August 17, 2023, the contingent B budget would then be in effect. The town must immediately rectify any library funding shortfall issues to remain in compliance with the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners for library certification and state aid. In no event should the library be closed and subject the town to any repayment of loans, debt, or negatively affect state aid. And then finally, each item to be considered a separate appropriation in the amount shown in the column captioned contingent A or B, and in the supplemental funding section to be appropriated contingent upon passage of a Proposition 2.5 ballot question under General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 21C. So moved.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. I'll reserve my questions for after. Mr. Breyer, do you have any additional information as petitioner on the discussion?
Sure. But this is, I call this the compromise budget. Because this is the first time that the people are going to actually vote on the school override, the assessment, as an individual line item. In the past, the town has always delivered when it's been its own item. The issue why it failed previously was because it was lumped in. It could be a 33% tax increase in some cases. So being its own question, I have confidence that for the extra $230 a year, people are going to vote for the override. People realize costs have gone up. They see how entangled the fire department, the police department is with this $900,000. The people of Dudley are going to step up and do the right thing. All I am focused on right now is to make sure that this school override passes. Because if it passes, then all the towns can at least operate on the floor of the 522 budget. And it's the perfect compromise because what you're asking to be incorporated in your own unique article is now contingent B. What I'm saying is, yes, I call that the Armageddon budget, but we don't have to bring Armageddon upon ourselves tonight. There is hope. Why would we do that to ourselves when there is time? August 17th, if the school override passes and the way my article is written, you will be empowered to actually start spending that money and not have to wait till October, the next town meeting, to present another balanced budget. The way the wording of the supplemental funding is worded, you're empowered. August 18th, you can hire back those firefighters if you need to hire them back. The school wins no matter what. So if we approve my article tonight, my amendment, the school is covered either way. There is no special town meeting with Charlton. And they can begin to prepare for the academic year. I think it's the best of all worlds. It may not be perfect, but it buys us time. There's no reason to bring Armageddon upon ourselves tonight. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Breyer. Additional conversations? Yes, sir. Mr. Siganovich. We'll go, Mr. Siganovich. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Mr. Breyer. You've put an enormous amount of effort in this. I've enjoyed the conversations we've had. I just have a couple questions. Does this amendment give us a balanced budget? And I'm asking that coming from a place, well, how will the Department of Revenue react? I'm wondering if they're going to be okay with it, meaning we've got the menu override this time. And what happens if 3 and 5 pass and 1, 2, and 4 fail? I'm just asking about the language to make sure that the Department of Revenue doesn't reject this, because then, yeah.
Mr. Breyer.
Through the moderator. I actually sent it to the Department of Revenue about a week and a half ago. I was expecting that it would take about 7 days. They got back to me within 24 hours. And they actually said that they do not have the statutory authority to review or recommend what to do. But they've got my language and everything, so they're not going to stop us. The key language here is at the end of the budget where it says supplemental funding notes from the 8/17/2023 special town election. That allows you to incorporate the override amounts directly into the line items and have a balanced budget. So to answer your question, yes, it is a balanced budget, and it considers the override questions as well.
I just want to add, I'm not coming from like an adversarial place. We're all trying to get to the same place, I think we're just taking different roads to get there.
Yeah.
Town council, is that,
Ms. Randazzo?
I'll get out of the way.
Good evening, folks. Again, Michelle Randazzo from Town Council's office. I too appreciate the amount of time that's gone into this. I've spent a lot of time reviewing this proposal, and I think specifically on the question that Mrs. Carey just asked. You won't, if you vote the proposed amendment, you will not leave tonight with a balanced budget, because it is still contingent upon the override for the schools, okay? So what does that mean in terms of the Department of Revenue? Okay? As Mr. Breyer mentioned, he reached out to the Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue does two very important things. Not the only things they do, but vis-a-vis town government and budgeting, they do two important things. They approve, certify free cash, okay? And free cash isn't free, but it's the money that's left over, if any, at the end of the fiscal year. You can't spend it unless they certify it. The second thing they do, critically, is approve your tax rate. If they don't approve your tax rate, the town can't send out the tax bills, and that may seem great to people who have high tax bills, but there's no money coming in, and the town can't pay the bills. They will not certify your tax rate until there's a balanced budget, okay? So those are specifically with respect to, is DOR gonna get in the middle of this? No, they're gonna let you vote, but as town council, I'm always worried about the law of unintended consequences, right? When we make an amendment on town meeting floor, at least in this instance, folks have had a lot of time to sort of talk about it and ruminate it, and I've seen various versions of this proposal, and I think it's gone a long way to try to address some of these issues. But I can tell you, in my opinion, you will not have a balanced budget tonight. I don't know if you folks want me to address any other issues or until they come up.
We can wait till they come up.
Okay.
Thank
But
you.
actually, can I just?
Yep.
There's just one other question that we've been talking about that I think it's really important to understand. When you're talking about voting on the regional school district revised assessment, the only way to avoid the possibility of that super, what we call the super town meeting, the district-wide meeting with the Dudley and Charlton voters, is to fully fund the regional school district assessment tonight without contingencies. Because of quirks under the state regulations, there's timeframes within which you have to act in order to be considered to have approved the budget, right? And I'm sure folks have been talking a lot about what happens if the assessment, if that regional school district revised budget and assessment isn't approved tonight. And that's what triggers the possibility of a super town meeting. Where you make the appropriation contingent upon the outcome of the August override, that is action that occurs outside of the timeframes that the state has set for action, and it will be considered a rejection of the budget. So you're not gonna, I'm not gonna say what the likelihood of a super town meeting would be in those circumstances, but I can tell you that the only way to ensure that there is no possibility for a super district-wide town meeting for the regional school budget is to vote and fully fund that revised assessment tonight without contingencies. And if you do that, you're gonna have to figure out where that money comes from. And that's gonna, obviously come from other departments. If the override questions, depending on how they turn out, I have no crystal ball. I wish I did. I'd have won the lottery and I'd be on a beach somewhere right now. But, there are so many different questions, and the permutations are such that I can't tell you what it's gonna look like August 18th as to what monies are voted and what are available. Because the questions, in June, they were presented to you as one override question for the school and for the government, that failed. So now the voters are going to be given a variety of different questions to vote on. Those monies can only be used specifically for the purpose of the in the question, right? So library can only be used for library, school and school, fire and police, only for fire and police. And if we really wanted, if there was a way feasibly to do a motion that could encompass all of those different outcomes, I don't see that this motion necessarily does it. I appreciate that the proponent has incorporated language that says all of those amounts, whatever's voted, get folded in. I'm concerned that that's not going to be sufficient for the Department of Revenue, because typically when an override is voted, unless a specific amount is voted to be a supplemental appropriation based on the outcome of the override, there will still need to be an appropriation vote after the override and in October. So bottom line, I think you're back to having to make adjustments in October. I see that there's a question that you want me to hang up.
Let Mr. Breyer come back up, yeah, and then I'll come over and then back.
First, I did send this and asked for town council review over a week and a half ago, and I got no response. So, and I sent it to the town administrator, and I asked for town council's opinion on this. So assuming I didn't get it, that's where I reached out to the Department of Revenue as well, and people, I mean, I've got 20 plus years experience modifying things as well. Even your budget is not technically the final balanced budget, because that's got to be done in October. And the town has till November to provide a balanced budget, to be certified after free cash and everything else. So my budget and your budget still have to go through the same exact process. And yes, the contingent A is dependent upon the supplemental funding of the school override. But if that fails, it clearly says in contingent B that it's funded through the Armageddon budget, which is what you're requesting now. So how come it's good for you now, but not in August 17th or 18th if it fails?
We'll start to ask folks to go out to the cafeteria. Thank you. Mr. Dawson?
Just to respond to the previous speaker, it's not my opinion, it's what the law says, right? And I hate, these are pretty complicated legal questions of municipal finance. And, you know, I'd like to try to be able to say them, describe them as simply as possible so that we're not here all night. But when it comes to the ability to vote contingent appropriations, there are a variety of rules that go along with that. That's the only contingency you can vote. You can't vote a budget appropriation that's contingent upon, you know, the Celtics winning, you know, the playoffs, right? So only these Proposition 2.5 questions, overrides, underrides, debt exclusions, are the types of budget contingencies that can be voted on by town meeting, okay? I go back to the question, which is, if you make tonight's budget contingent upon the passage of the August 17th override, you will not have fully funded the regional school district assessment, and you will have not foreclosed a super town meeting, okay? The budget as proposed to you by the town tonight, obviously, I'm not a numbers person. I come from a family of accountants, they think I'm the black sheep of the family. I have to defer to the numbers crunchers for the math. But when I look at that budget, it does fully appropriate the $900,000, 900 plus, for the revised school assessment. Yes, at the cost of reducing other line items. But it's balanced tonight, and it finally, conclusively appropriates the regional school district assessment, okay? And those things have value, particularly if you are concerned about the possibility of a super town meeting, okay? Now, waiting till August to see that outcome, I see the appeal. But in my view, and I'm outside, right? You're the voters. We can't predict what is going to happen with all those different questions. And so the options that are proposed here, as the previous speaker states, the contingent B is the budget that's being proposed by the town now. I'm not saying either of them they're the same thing, essentially, right? The real question is with respect to that budget that's voted contingent on the passage of the overrides. And that's where I think the uncertainty comes in. to contrast a little bit with how the budget was presented to you in May, and I think it's been alluded to here before, we had a very specific agenda item with a chart, with a budget, with specific funding sources, and the amounts that were subject to the override. And there was a single override question that would be for both the schools and the town budget. And the benefit, although it didn't pass, but the rationale for doing that way is so that it could be presented to the voters in as easy to understand as possible, and also be voted in as straightforward a manner as possible. Okay? Now, where you have all of those different override questions that you folks will vote on in August, I am concerned that the Department of Revenue would say that if you go with the proposed amendment, that they will not find that it's sufficiently appropriated specific amounts, specific line items from the overrides, and you might have to do it all over again in October anyway.
Thank you. Yes, dead center, towards the back. Yep.
Jerry Frank, 13 Causeway Road, Dudley. So I have a few questions here. I'm not sure if I can do just one or all of them, but the first question is, in the two budgets that are being presented to us, one of them includes the school money and the other one includes the money that we need for the library. And then on the other hand, I should say that each one of those budgets is missing one of those funding sources. So, and it's contingent on the override. They're contingent on the override. In other words, override questions are being proposed to solve those problems and left up to the voters in August. My question is no matter what, it seems that at least whichever way we go, for example, if we go with what you're presenting tonight, with the selectmen are presenting tonight, it funds the schools, but there's an equal amount being asked at the override. What happens if the override, if your budget goes through and the override goes through? What happens to that 930,000 or something? We're going to be double funding the school one way. The other way, we're going to be double funding the library. So what happens to that money? I don't think that's anything anybody wants to do or intends to do, but we're sort of stuck with that the way it's being presented to us. Could maybe you comment on what will happen to the money in either one of those situations, or both those situations?
So if I can just summarize and then I'll turn it over. So we'll call it $900,000 in change because I don't have it right in front of me. So that $900,000 in change that's appropriated to the school department's assessment, which is also the amount on the override. If the override passes, what happens to the existing monies in the current budget? Would it be doubled or would it be appropriated elsewhere? Does that kind of sum your question?
Yeah, and who decides where it's going to be appropriated to, if you don't already have an idea of what you're doing, or is that just money that's going to be?
Great, Mr. Rizzo.
Thank you, folks. I'm just going to stay here until you tell me to go sit back down. The monies from the override would have to be specifically appropriated in October to the school, under the town's budget, would have to be appropriated to the schools, and then that 900,000 would be reallocated out by this town meeting, whether it's in October or sooner, to the other departments.
So if we, just so I get this right, if we vote yes, if we have your budget and we vote yes on the override, then we're basically giving money to other departments without, the override is saying is getting $930,000, close to $1 million, is going to be distributed to other departments. Am I correct on that?
Through you, Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
You know, basically, but not really. The issue is that, I know, right? What a lawyer answer, right? Override dollars are considered override dollars by the Department of Revenue. So when they look at the monies that are, you know, because the town clerk after every town meeting sends off to Department of Revenue all of the appropriations that are voted, and whether it's at the annual or specials. And that's what DOR looks at when they evaluate your free cash, and your tax rate. And so they will look at those override dollars and say, if you're gonna spend them, those have to go to the schools, right? Just as with any of the other overrides. Library's gotta go to library, police and fire gotta go to police and fire, and you will know, as of August 18th, what that additional, if any, because I got no crystal ball, what monies may be approved by the voters as override dollars, and you can make those adjustments accordingly. Understand that the monies that have been appropriated in May, I mean, it's not balanced vis-a-vis the revised school assessment, but those monies were appropriated, they're non-contingent, they are available for use, and they may not be sufficient for the entire fiscal year, but I don't think that there's any, I mean, I can't think of a way that you will not be in a position in October of having to make some adjustments to the budget numbers, whether it be one override passes, two, Lord willing, all of them pass, or some of them pass. You're gonna need to take those monies that were voted, put them in their specific line items.
Yeah, I
and
think,
then
yeah, that, I understand that. I'm just saying that if it goes through, then our budget has extra money in it.
No, because the override dollars are not automatically appropriated into the existing budget.
No, but the money that's in the budget will then be removed from the budget on that line item and moved someplace
I'm sorry.
else.
Yeah, only with town meeting doing that.
Yeah. Okay, but we're certainly not gonna give the school an extra $930,000, right? So is what's gonna happen in effect. So my next question is, I think it's already been answered. There's gonna be another town meeting after this we have to rehash all this again after if any of the overrides pass. Is that correct? You have to come back to town meeting.
Through you, Mr. Meyer, that's correct. Your bylaws require an October town meeting anyway. So you always have one in October. That is typically when, any necessary fiscal year budget adjustments are made.
Okay, so my next question, I'd like to address it to legal counsel or to the library trustees or the FAA or maybe the selectmen, but does anybody answer the question about the 2.6 million plus 13 years interest that we have to give to the library if we do not fund it to accreditation? In other words, if we don't include it in the budget tonight and it doesn't go through we don't get the override in August, are we gonna have to pay this 2.6 million plus interest?
Mr. Dozel.
Through you, Mr. Moderator. I've been in contact with the state. They have not definitively said, yes, we have to do that. What they've suggested is we wait and see what the override results are. They have, look, you have enough in the budget to keep the library open and operating for, I think at least until October, right? And so the state is not gonna be sending you a bill, at least what they've told me, for any of the state aid that you've received thus far, on, tomorrow or any time before August 17th. It was in fact the state that suggested that we keep the library operating as best we can until August 17th and see how the override goes.
But if we don't include it in the budget tonight, there's a chance such as the override not passing, and we will have to pay that 2.6 million plus interest. Right, we're gambling now, right?
So I've not received any communication from the state with any demand in that regard.
But isn't that the law? Isn't that how their law is written?
If
The
I can-
laws, go
So
ahead.
there's two different pots of money that the library gets from the state. There may be more, but the two main ones we're talking about are state aid and construction grants. Now, the library did get a construction grant, I think 10 or 12 years ago, and the obligation of having to repay that, we really need to look at those grant documents, if there was a shelf life, for example, if after 10 years. I'm being honest with you, right? I mean, I have not gotten anything, and I've not seen anything from the state that has been provided to me, whether it's from the library, reaching out to them or otherwise, that expressly said, yes, you're gonna have to write a check for 2.6 million, tomorrow. Do I think it's possible? Sure, but we won't know that for sure until the outcome of the library override vote occurs.
Question number
Okay,
3.
and my
Mr.
next question is for the, regarding the wording at the end of the contingent budget that was just proposed regarding the library. it says that the library has to be funded. So I'm just asking, like, if it says it has to be funded, why are we not putting it in the budget? And if we don't put it in the budget tonight, where's it gonna come from?
We can turn it to you or to the petitioner, I guess. Go, Ms. Randazzo.
Well, just I think that's an excellent question, right? The proposed budget, the amendment, doesn't say where that money's coming from, right? And I think that one of the issues, and the proponent may have a different response for me, but I couldn't see, if the library override fails, I don't know where that money is coming from. And that would be appropriate for an October town meeting to then look at if that's the choice the voters want to make in terms of allocating the resources. I will note that the language that specifically says that the library shall be open, and in no event shall it be closed. This is going to be an extraordinarily unpopular opinion, but I don't think that that's within town meeting's purview. You can appropriate, you are an appropriating body, you can appropriate the money, but it would be up to the trustees to expend that money if it is appropriated. But in the first instance, it's got to come from somewhere. So if the override fails, I don't know where that money comes from.
Mr. Breyer, if you'd care to address that point?
Sure. The library's already funded from the 5/22/2023 budget. I don't have to figure out where it is. It's already funded. And it seems to me that in trying to help you get your budget passed, you're messing up my amendment. So if I simply got rid of contingent B, I would get rid of all my problems because they all center around your proposed budget. The library is fully funded. All I'm doing is I'm repeating exactly what occurred on 5/22, which is a contingent budget based upon a successful override of the school being funded. We did a contingent budget in May. There's no difference. What's messing everything up is your budget I'm trying to save in here. So I have no problem amending my motion to drop the whole contingent B and go for broke and just go for contingent A and hope for a successful override on the school. And if it fails, we're back here again figuring it out.
So what I heard you say was, are you wishing to make the amendment to your amendment? You use the language, it's not me, I'm just asking. I can't force the direction, I just want clarity.
Not yet, I'm not gonna do that yet. Because I think there is a benefit to having their budget in here. Because it does avoid the special town meeting, the regional super meeting. So yes, that was my emotion speaking, but let's keep it in. But it's funded. And again, if you read the notes on the supplemental funding, I've worked with the Division of Local Services. I've never in my 20 years had a warrant article, a petition denied by the Attorney General's office or the Department of Revenue. It's rock solid.
If I
Ms.
could,
Randazzo.
the Attorney General does not review budget appropriations. The Department of Revenue will only look at this in the context of your free cash certification and your tax rate setting. And that, the lawyer is concerned about that, right? Because the law of unintended consequences. And, again, to the previous speaker, the issue, I think, is, we're not saying different things. Your contingent B is the same as the town's proposed revised budget right now, but it balances, right? And it balances and it makes the regional school district appropriation non-contingent, which is the way to avoid the regional super town meeting. Obviously, if voters have other concerns or other issues, that's up to the voters, but that's the outcome of going with a contingent appropriation, even if it's just for the regional school district assessment.
And there's no denying that we have to come back in October. Because usually in October, that's right, we know what the certified free cash is, we have a better visibility. That's when police and fire usually come back and other departments and say, hey, we missed this. The snow and ice may say, hey, the forecast is really bad, we make the adjustments like we've always done. So even if they pass this tonight, the Department of Revenue is not going to stop us. They're not going to do anything until after our fall town meeting.
Absolutely.
So you have nothing to lose.
But I guess the question is, what is the game? I'm asking, again, I'm sorry, I'm asking a
Yeah.
question for the moderator, but
It could be real simple. First, there's no library immediate to fund in this evening. You don't even have to think about what happens with the library, and if we have to repay, it doesn't happen tonight. Could it happen on August 18th? It certainly could, but we don't, it's off the table.
But it's not on the, I'm sorry. I'll let you finish if I
Yeah,
could.
so the library is totally off the table tonight. All the departments that have been cut to this point, operating on this Armageddon budget, they could be restored back to the 522 budget. There should be no reason why they couldn't be.
If I may, and again, I will ask the budget folks involved in the numbers, right, to tell me if I've got this wrong, but the amounts that are appropriated for the departments, in particular the library, my understanding that it's even with, I know folks have been calling it the Armageddon budget, I might call it the austerity budget, whatever you want to call it, right? It is a lean budget, but my understanding is that even with that lean budget, it's enough for operations of the library for the few months till we get past the override. And so with all of the departments, right, the budget that is the May 22nd budget has appropriated monies that you don't have, right, because the overrides failed. So, yeah, the May, well, my understanding of the May 22nd budget was it appropriated a series of funds, but only accounted for less than the $900,000 of the additional regional school assessment. So you're $900,000 in the hole, okay? You know, if I can add, right? It seems to me you're $900,000 in the hole. And that's what the town's budget seeks to account for, is that $900,000, right? And at the same time saying, that's off the table, we're done with it, there's no regional school, there's no super town meeting, and then depending on what overrides pass or don't pass, then we'll, you know, after August 18th, we'll know, and we can make whatever adjustments are necessary then and add money back into the budget, depending on what other overrides pass. And, you know, I think it's sort of a difference, and again, I'm not a finance person, but I think it's sort of a difference in, are you gonna be conservative fiscally and make sure that you're spending within what you know you have, especially in light of 2 failed overrides? Like, I'm not putting money on anything. I'd like to think that the overrides pass, but I don't have any pulse on what's going on in your community. And it'd be great if they all passed. It would make October very easy, right? There wouldn't be any hard questions at that point.
Mr. Frank, you were up, final question, I think.
Maybe.
Well, final question for this round at the mic, we'll leave it
Okay,
there.
so I think I think the problem we have is that there are 2 things. We'd like everything to be funded, you know, as much as possible, but there are 2 things that it seems that we need to fund, that this town needs to fund. One is that extra money for the school, the $930,000, or more or less, and we need to fund the library, because if not, we're taking a gamble. We don't know, I mean, eventually we're gonna have to spend the money on the library. If not, it just seems like we're gonna have to pay $2.6 million plus interest. That's what everybody who's looked at that law says. Now, they may give us a break, you know, a 5% break or a 10% break on it, but it's gonna be pretty close to that. So, and why I agree with the budget that the previous speaker here is proposing, I think it has the problem that it's not funding the library in the budget yet. And so I think one simple way to do this is just to follow his recommendations, his budget, but fund the library in there. In other words, put the money back into the quote-unquote Armageddon budget and fund that. And by doing that, we can wait till, see what happens with the town meetings to clear things up and to bring other budgets back up. But I think we need to put in tonight, we need to put in the money for the school and the money for the library. So I'm gonna make a motion that the budget that the selectmen are proposing in the Armageddon budget include the money for the library.
All right, so Mr. Frank, I'm actually gonna hold on that motion because we're discussing the amendment right now. That was put up by Mr. Breyer, so I'm not gonna permit that motion at this time. We're gonna come back to Mr. Siganovich, and then we're gonna go to the center aisle, and then down here to Mr. Sullivan.
Mr. Moderator, I'll yield my time. Mr. Franks actually asked my question about the library. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Raymond?
Richard Raymond, 191 Corbin Road. As I sit here and I listen to everything that's going on, it seems, even from town council, that unintended consequences pop up every now and then. And one of them just may be, if we don't properly fund the library, we may owe the state over $2.5 million that they're gonna collect. And that's gonna drive these tax rates much greater than any amendment is being proposed or any override that's gonna be driven. So I'm very concerned about that. How do we protect everything? Because the May 24th or 22nd budget, the budget that was passed in May funded the library. The proposed budget only portionally funds it until such time as you see if you can get more money. So that's putting it in the gambling risk area. So to say that, well, we protected it for a little while, well, we can also protect the schools for a little while until we get our act together and do what we gotta do here, without exposing ourselves to a probability of over $2 million of paying the state back. So, if I'm wrong, please tell me I'm wrong, because she used the terminology unintended consequences.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Stephen Sullivan, Cardinal Drive. We've had public meetings, we all know why we're here. The assessment changed. So, and I have an enormous amount of respect for the petitioner. I served him 25 years ago on the planning board, enormous amount of respect. But he did it again tonight, he did it the other meeting, he used the word hope twice. I hope the people see the wisdom, I hope the people, and at our selectmen's meeting, he used the word hope. He said the people are gonna see it, I hope they see that people are literally shaking their heads no behind him. So, to put us out of whack, 900,000 on top of the 10%, which was already taken across the board by your town departments. So we talked level services on the school side, you're not even getting level service on your town side. The 900 would put you even further behind, which comes into the petitioner's phrase of Armageddon budget. So to front load a budget, to spend in July, spend in August, hope the override passes, any override, is not a strategy, because now you're into September. We have 3 months of the fiscal year gone, where we spent. Our task with FAA, the treasurer, the accountant, all your professional people who did 99% of the work, the selectmen only get the review at the selectmen's meeting. That puts us out of whack, plus 10%. If and when the schools get the extra 901,000, assume nothing else passes, that puts your town funding back to 2015. That's where the cuts, the so-called Armageddon budget, that's where we're at. And also, if we slide 360,000, fully fund, again, spend the money the first few months of the year, that puts the town at some point potentially out of whack, another 10 months on the 360,000. I mean, the 360 has to be accounted for on top of the 900. So any action could possibly take the 360 on top of the 9. We're back at 2015. If nothing else passes, we're going to be even further back. And I'm sorry, some of you people in the town a lot longer than me. I've been involved a long time. I don't see how, with new revenue growth averaging 200-something thousand, not even 200-something thousand, when one side is asking for 900, those numbers will never ever match, and your town side is going to go further behind. And again, we're big boys and girls. We can take a beating. For everyone to say, well, the selectmen lumped that question together, that's why I got defeated. No, that was a joint decision made with the school committee and the selectmen. It was all for one, we're all in this together, shared sacrifice. Now it could be twice, we hear from the people, the schools here, well, break it up. We'll vote for you, but I don't wanna vote for everything. The bottom line is we don't have the revenue to support all the requests. So just keep the 900 and 1,000 in mind. If the schools somehow get that 900, your town is gonna be minus 10% across the board, minus 900, and hope is not a strategy. There's no pot of gold. It's gonna come at the end of the fiscal year, or come next March, we get 900 or $1 million to settle what we have to, the bill we got from the schools. So the town will just continue to go backwards, and the other side will not.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. I saw you there, Mr. Z. Just a second.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have two questions for town council. One deals with the library and this amendment. That is a big concern. Does the amendment save the library in any pertinent way, permanent way? And the second question is Article 2 legally sound, and does it both balance the budget between now and October and have the effect of eliminating a super meeting?
Ms. Randazzo?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Moderator. So, no, the proposed amendment would not eliminate the possibility of a super town meeting, as for the reasons I've stated before. Any appropriation to the school assessment contingent upon the override on August 17th is considered a disapproval of the budget. It's just not within the 45 days of the time period that the state sets for voting and appropriating the money. With respect to the library, again, math not being my strong suit, I will simply say the money's gotta come from somewhere. So if the money is coming from the override, that is not money you have today. And so the budget will not be balanced today. It may be balanced in the future, and that balancing may be because of the overrides, and that if the library one is successful, or it may be because of additional adjustments that are made to other department line items at a subsequent town meeting. But you won't walk out today with a budget. I mean, unless someone can come up with that $360,000 throughout the rest of what is already a pretty reduced, what I'll call a base budget.
Thank you. Mr. Zakowski?
Scott Sikowski, 8 Catherine Street. First, I want to commend the schools. You're not wasting any money on air conditioning. In any case, I'm going to say something say something that's probably going to be grossly unpopular here. And it has to do with priorities. We've spent about an hour, a little less than an hour, talking about a building with books and a loan. In the meantime, we've got public safety that's grossly underfunded. You talk about gambling with a building with books, but you're gambling every day that we don't have a balanced budget, that we don't have proper funding with our health and our emergency services. Now, I question the way the cuts were made, but that's a different thing. We're arguing about a damn library and a loan. And I'll be honest, as much as I don't trust the state government, they're not going to come down here and hold a gun to our head and say, give us $2.5 million. They're not going to do it. They're looking at our best interest as well. No, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. They are not going to come down here and say, pay up and pay up now.
Rein it back, address it up here, Mr. Zakowski.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
In any case, what we're here to do today is to balance the budget. I've known the amender for a long time. For, I'd say 99.9% of the time, I've trusted everything he said, everything that he posts, everything he talks about. He's a numbers guy. He knows his stuff. However, there's too much, as one of the selectmen said, there's too much hope. I have family members that I listen to constantly say, no, no, no. Some of them are sitting in here today. They will vote no. They will vote no on everything, just because of spite. That's the way it is. I don't know how the rest of our taxpayers will vote. I know how I'm gonna vote. As much as I don't like it, I don't wanna raise my taxes that much, but our town needs the money to survive. And that's the bottom line. But can we move on and get this? We need to get a balanced budget, and we need a balanced budget today, even as much as it might hurt.
On the left-hand side, yeah. Maybe for safety, just head back to the one that's a little taller there.
My name's Eric Franzen, 43 Ramshorn Road in Dudley. My daughter was in an accident last Monday. She's currently in the ICU in Massachusetts. If it wasn't for the Dudley Fire Department, I wouldn't be here. There was a call afterwards. We only have 2 firefighters. So currently, all our children are in danger. If it wasn't for the fire department that reacted for my daughter, I wouldn't be here. And this madness has to stop. We don't need a library. We need to take care of our kids. We've let down our children here, folks. Our number one priority should be our schools, our fire department, our police department, period. I'm emotional right now, but you know, when you look at your daughter, and she's got a tube down her nose, and she says she's scared, put yourself in my shoes when you vote. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Franzen. Yes.
Good evening, everybody. It's Colin Humphreys, Lakeside Drive. So I'll be brief, but honestly, I don't even have words for the situation that we are in right now. You know, I think a lot of people here in this room have good ideas. I think a lot of people have good intentions. However, there's so much uncertainty tonight that if we had more time, I would suggest that, and I'm not suggesting this, so this is not a motion, but I would suggest we adjourn this meeting, figure it out, come all on the same page, because our town and our citizens amongst each other are not on the same page on this issue. However, we don't have time. And, you know, it's just disheartening, you know, to hear, you know, what I just heard. This is a safety concern. This is a concern about our schools. You know, and quite honestly, I don't know what we're gonna do. Because, you know, I've heard from many great petitioners tonight, and there are still a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainties. With the town's plan, a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainties. You know, none of this would have happened if we had passed the override, but that's beyond. What I do want to say is I think we need to figure this out. We need to stop yelling at each other. We need to stop, you know, sort of the vitriol, the accusations. You know, we're all scared. We're all upset. You know, we all want this to end. We all want to get out of this situation. And at this point, honestly, we're here. We have to make a decision tonight. I don't know what to do, but I know we need to find a way to come together. We need to figure this out, and I don't really know the best way to approach that.
Thanks, Mr. Humphries. Looking for a new hand. Red shirt.
Teresa Russo, D'Alessandro Ave in Dudley. I hope I'm not alone in this room of being really confused by numbers and percentages and what we should do. My question is, this isn't being asked facetiously or with any premotive, Does the amended budget that the town is proposing tonight to pass, does it restore the fire department and the police department levels to where they were?
Great question.
Somebody answer it.
I'll defer to Mr. Ruda.
So through the moderator, just for clarification, when you say the amended budget being proposed, are you talking about Article 2 being amended from May 22nd, or are you talking about?
Yes.
You're talking about Article 2 and not what Mr. Breyer is presenting?
No, the reference is to the amendment that was proposed by Mr. Breyer.
No, the town's budget.
Oh, well then, all right, so now I'm confused.
Okay.
Nice job.
You have asked us to vote on your amended May budget tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Does that amended budget restore the fire and police department to the previous levels?
No.
Okay.
What it does is when we leave here tonight, the budget will be balanced until we get the results of the override on August 17th. When we get the results from the override on August 17th, we will take those results, depending on what passed and what failed. In October, we will have another special town meeting, and we will balance within the results from the override.
So it's a balanced budget, but not one that helps with our safety services
No,
till the overrides.
correct.
Now, if you've already included the $901,000 for the school, what would possibly be the motivation to vote for the override and increase our tax rate?
Because that $901,000 is being provided from an already depleted 10% or more reduced budget that became in effect upon the failure of the last two override attempts. So when you appropriate the money and balance the budget, because right now there's a $901,000 hole in the budget, when you now balance it, you have to take that $901,000 from an already imperiled municipal budget. The question was, what's the benefit of doing it? The benefit of doing it is that if you do not have, if we take no action within 45 days to balance our budget, the school committee has the option of calling a super town meeting, which is a district-wide meeting where they will vote Charlton residents, Dudley residents in a room just like this will vote on how much Dudley's assessment will be. $901,000 or potentially more than $901,000. Tonight, if you balance, that goes away. That risk is removed. It could get worse than this, believe it or not.
No, I believe you, trust me. Okay, and the last thing I want clarification on, if I heard the council correctly, it's being proposed as a balanced budget, but it's really not either until August vote and October vote. As the gentleman presented is not really a balanced budget today. Neither one of them are.
No, I don't agree with that.
Okay.
And I can ask town
That's
council
what I
to come
heard.
back up, Mr. Moderator, but it is a balanced budget. If the bottom line works. It doesn't fund what we want it to fund, but the bottom line now works. I believe that what Mr. Breyer is proposing is contingent upon what happens on August 17th. It doesn't change any spending habits in this room. If Mr. Breyer's amendment passes, we're not all of a sudden going to have department heads that are spending like the overrides passed. They're going to spend conservatively for the next 2 or 3 weeks until we get the results on August 17th. The idea of balancing tonight is to put an end to the idea that people from Charlton are going to come in and make a decision on what Dudley is going to spend on their school assessment.
Okay.
Mr. Breyer's amendment doesn't do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Raymond?
Yeah, I just want to get one thing cleared up here. The last time I was in the library, it was by accident. I don't think the library question is a big question versus police, fire, and everything else. God, if you had to put them in a line of priority, it was a straight situation. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Police, fire, and everything else, that comes that's a much greater need than a library. The problem is, what are our obligations to the library, and what are our liabilities should we not fund it? Because if we do have to come up with the $2.5 million, that's gonna have a much larger and greater effect on our public safety than the budgets that are being proposed. That's why the library is being talked about. What is our exposed liability should we not fund it? That's the question. Because if we don't, and they do, and we do have to pay back grant money or matching funds or whatever, however it's worded, the effect on our public safety is going to be far greater than anything else that's being proposed here tonight. So, by funding the library, we're actually going to help, that situation and not expose ourselves to that risk. I'm just trying to make that clear. It's not a black and white issue, police versus library. It's the effects.
Thank you. Mr. Frank, you had your hand up with a hat earlier, I think. I saw the hand alone. I do have the cheetahs on.
I think what I wanted to say is been said, but I just want to kind of put it together at this point, that I agree with the previous speaker said that, even if nobody ever walked into that library again, and it never got used, not funding it would be a major cut to the highway department, the police department, the fire department, and every other department in town. If we have to pay, and it's not $2.5 million, it's $2.5 billion with 13 years interest, so you can double that number pretty easily. So it's just a crazy thing not to do it. And I just think that at this point, I'm not sure if this is the time to do it or not, but I would like to amend that budget to include the library money in it. It's already in the existing budget that we're operating in, just to include it in the Armageddon budget, which would fall to if everything falls apart.
Mr. Marcy.
John Marcy, Fairview Ave. Wow, what a crowd. I think this is the most well-attended town meeting I've seen, so I am very, very, very happy to see everybody here. This is what it's all about. We always say we want you to come, and you came, so thank you. A couple things, listening. I'm going to do it in reverse order with Mr. Frank's question. The previous speaker, excuse me, Mr. Moderator. If we're going to include the library in this budget, where are you going to get it from? What are we also cutting? Because it's a one for one, right? Let's come back to why we got here, right? The school committee decided to add an additional $901,000, which is not a department, it's a bill. Okay, does everybody get that? That means we have to pay it. And my opinion, this is my 12th year on this board. Over my dead body, are we going to have another town tell us how to run our town and take our money? We cannot have it. We have to solve it tonight. Must solve this tonight. And we need a balanced budget. Okay? If we give $1 to the school, we have to take $1 from the fire department. That's math. These are facts. And this team, the department heads, have worked real hard. You think this is where we wanted to end up? No. Public safety has always been the #1 priority of this board and every board I've sat on. But the state says we have to have a balanced budget. And we have to fund our school. That is very important. We got a bill, we got to honor the bill. So Mr. Breyer, I've known John 20 years. He's a really good friend of mine. And he's absolutely right that school override must pass. If nothing else happens, that one, guys, I know there's people are no across the board, that one has to pass. That is critical to this coming together. So stand up for your town. Stand up for your schools. Stand up for your public safety. And you know what? Stand up for your library as well. Thank you.
So at this point, I just want to issue a reminder, and I've been trying to pay attention to the questions as they're coming in. We are discussing whether or not to amend Article 2 as it's written to the petitioner's proposal. What I'd like to do, any additional questions at this point, I'd like to get into for a brief period. Not the merits of the amendment, but if there are questions about the amendment that need clarification. Well, Mr. Frank, you didn't walk very far.
Yeah, so I think the big question here is, if we support the previous speaker amendment, it's important to know two things, which I think somebody probably knows. I'm not sure that this is such a great area. One is, if we do not fund the library, will we have to pay 2.6 million plus interest back?
Okay, I can answer that. We don't have a definitive response or direction from the state at this point. So somebody's earlier, one of the speakers said it is a would. It is actually a could. We don't know.
Well, the law says it's a would.
Correct. If we go with the law, then you have your answer.
Okay, and my second question is at the end of the previous speaker's amendment, his wording regarding the library, is that binding or not binding if we accept his amendment?
Well, that was actually going to be one of my questions that I deferred my questions for, the legality and the depth of that legally. Mr. Mendoza?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As I mentioned earlier, in my opinion, it's not legally binding on town officials.
Thank you. Mr. Siganovich, you had your hand. Oh, there we are. Sorry. You wore the shorts for it. I'm sorry, just name and address, please.
Yes, so Rich Norton, 1 Queen Circle. Town council stated, as did Mr. Sullivan, multiple times that the only way to avoid the super meeting is to approve I'm gonna call it the Armageddon budget. And that's, without question, everything I've read, that's factually accurate. If we amend or accept Mr. Breyer's budget, whatever, I believe that the school committee, and there are members here, they could, hopefully, I'm asking for them to speak to this if this is possible. Are they going to cancel the super meeting if the override passes?
Ms. Cavagnani? Oh, podium's perfect. Sure, yes, thank you.
Stephen Lash, Superintendent for the Dudley Child Regional School District. We continue to work as a school committee and as a district to move forward in that direction. Obviously, without the town of Dudley being able to assure us of the assessment at this point in time, that is still on the table. Would it be canceled if we received our assessment? Of course, I'm sure the school committee would cancel a special district-wide meeting if the assessment does come through from the town of Dudley.
Thank you. Mr. Breyer.
Kathy, please, question to the chair of the school committee, because I've worked with the school committee. I've worked with the various department heads. And I'm going to disagree with town council because my contingent B column is your budget. This budget will avoid a super town meeting. It is hedged. Ideally, if the override goes through, in which case the school gets their assessment, and if the override fails, contingent B automatically kicks in, which is your budget, which grabs it from the other departments. As chair of the school committee, what is your interpretation? Would this satisfy the requirement?
Okay.
I will say this. When we talked, we did not understand that, what town council is now saying. So town council is now saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that with the fact that you have 5 different overrides, right? There's so many different possibilities, like by math, you know, as a math teacher, I'm thinking of all the different options that you have and how many different options you can have based on that vote, that you would have to have set up all those different contingency budgets. Would that make sense? Yes? Okay, so because that doesn't do that, it's not necessarily a valid budget, correct?
Go ahead, Mr. Brown. And then Ms. Randazzo, if you.
That was our dilemma at the Board of Selectmen meeting, when we kind of had that idea, and Sully said, well, geez, Sean, what if it all fails? All right, we move out the override rate, we go exponential.
Right.
That is the key to the language at the end, that the special notice for supplemental funding actually helps the contingent, the Armageddon budget, and it helps ours, and it will stand up, and the Department of Revenue, Division of Local Services will be fine with it, because it says very clearly that it's to be automatically appropriated to the proper line items. That frees up that money to the general fund, which then can be reconciled in October. So all those exponentials are taken care of in that final section with the correct legal wording.
Can I say this?
Yes.
Please know, I cannot, you know, I am the chair of the school committee. I can only speak as a member of the school committee. So it is not my intention to ever have to, I do not want to see our town at a super town meeting. I want us to figure this out together. Because like you said, it is important for us to figure out how are we going to fund our fire department, how are we going to fund our police and our schools and everybody. So,
Mr. Siganovich was up.
That's the second time that's happened tonight that someone asked my question. Thank you, sir. So that's what I was trying to get at. If the amended budget passes, does that avoid a super town meeting? And I'm hearing it doesn't. Possibly. Is that correct? That's correct. So if the amendment does not void the, okay. Okay. So we could still go to a super town meeting with the amendment, correct? That's coming from the, could you?
Just for clarification, we're talking amendment, we're talking the amendment that's on the floor right now. Yeah, okay.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, I'm talking about the amendment on the floor, not the proposed budget from the town, but Mr. Breyer's amendment. Specifically, does that avoid a super town meeting?
Thanks, Superintendent Lamarche.
Again, Stephen Lamar, Superintendent for Dudley Charlton. Could it? Sure. But I just want to be clear, our role here is not to decimate the town of Dudley with our assessment. That's not our role. So, yes, I understand that, Mr. Breer, we haven't met personally, but I really appreciate the work you put into all the finances and the contingency and all of that, but it can't stop the momentum of planning towards something because we're counting on votes, which we've tried to count on 2 times prior. So you were asking us to wait until August 17th to take any action. As you indicated yourself in your presentation, school starts at the end of August. So it doesn't it maybe slows down the thinking and the momentum of it, but it can't change the planning right now until the assessment for the town of Dudley is paid. I don't know if that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just looking for new hands. Ms. Carmignani, you can come back up, then we'll jump to the back and then to the middle.
I guess my question is for town council. Sorry, you're here. You know, we just want to know, like, if the contingent budgets, if both budgets are that the school gets it, pardon, like either way, I don't feel like I would need to go to a super town meeting, but you're saying that that's not actually legal. Okay, tell me.
All yours, Ms. Randazzo.
I am really earning my money tonight. So, Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the bills are gonna get paid.
Yeah, that was kind of good.
No, to answer Ms. Carmignani's question, okay? I'm asked legally what the legal effect is. And I can tell you that per state regulations, if you don't appropriate the money in a non-contingent fashion within the time window the state sets, it's considered a rejection of the budget, and there is still a possibility that the district could move forward towards a super town meeting. That's all I'm saying. That's what the law is. It doesn't say that it's gonna happen, as the superintendent indicated. School starts pretty darn soon in comparison to the override votes. And so there's a lot of planning that understandably goes into what you're gonna have as services and staffing and everything else come the start of school. I mean, I will defer to the school, but I think they had to make those decisions in May and June, right? Because they have to send out layoff notices by state law by certain dates, right? So leaving that amount contingent on August, that's the effect. You don't have a final assessment that's been appropriated within the time period that the state requires.
Excellent. Where did I say first? Let's go, Mr. Raymond.
We're getting very redundant here, we're getting a lot of mixed answers. I'd like to move the question.
Motion to move the question has been made and seconded. Ms. Randazza, the majority? Sorry, the consult was around the majority vote, and do I have to use the clickers? The motion's been made to move the question and seconded. There is no discussion on this. All in favor, aye? Aye. All opposed? That's a clear majority. We were voting on moving the question. Yeah, we were voting on moving the question. I'm sorry, we'll back it up, we'll do it again. To move the question basically means we're going to end debate at this point. Okay? All in favor of moving the question? Aye? Aye. All opposed? Marvelous. That was majority, not quite unanimous because of that one. We are going to go ahead and vote on the amendment at this time, if we will be making the amendment. Okay? This is not to adopt the amendment. Okay, just so everybody's clear.
Point of order.
Yes, sir.
Clarification. So this motion was made to accept the amended budget with a contingent A and B columns. So this vote is going to be to affirm that and adopt it? I'm confused.
Yeah, how the amendment on the floor worked. You made an you motioned an amendment. So I'm just going to consult with Ms. Randazza. All right, yeah, I was actually 100% on this one. So when the warrant article as presented was made as a main motion, right? It was seconded. We entered into a little bit of discussion, and then an amendment to the article was proposed. At that point, and it was seconded, so we entered into discussion about amending the main article. So we had a primary amendment on the floor. In order for us to move the primary amendment to a vote, okay, if it were to pass, it would then become the main motion if the amendment is accepted through a majority, okay? We're going to be voting on accepting the amendment to make it the main motion and replace Article 2 as it was printed in the warrant originally. We good? All right. So, we are not voting to adopt the amendment, we are voting to replace Article 2 as printed in the warrant with the amendment that we've been discussing. Right? This is a clicker activity. We are looking for a majority. Amendment for Article 2, A, 1 for yes, B, 2 for no. Okay, we have a clear majority. We will move our main motion. I've got to find the language. Through unanimous consent, I'm asking to allow me to dispense with the reading of all the verbiage that we've been discussing. So moved and seconded. Marvelous. Thank you. At this point, we'll open up discussion on the merits of the article that is in front of you. Oh, hold on. We discussed the merits of the amendment. We didn't discuss the merits of the article. Mr. Raymond?
By the article, you mean the amended article?
It's actually the article.
Didn't we just discuss the Jesus out of it? And under that guise, I'd like to move right for a vote as a motion.
Fair. While I was consulting, I did miss the last part. Did you suggest that we move it? Okay, do I have a second? Fair. Again, like I said at the start, I don't get everything right. I'd like to take a voice vote. All in favor of moving to a vote? Aye. All opposed? That's unanimous. At this time, we'll go ahead and call for a vote. Just a reminder, this is a 2/3 majority vote required because it does deal with stabilization money and it's associated to our budget. We'll be voting on the main motion, Article 2, FY 2024 budget with adjusted regional school district appropriations. Is that the original language? Yeah. It's okay. This didn't count. It's okay. I just wanted to make sure that we were all crystal, looking at the right information. Believe it or not, despite the fact that this runs very well, we don't rehearse this. So I do appreciate all of your attention, to everything that we've been doing. So we are good. We are going to go ahead and move Article 2 to a vote at this time. All in favor 1A, yes. 2B, no. All right. Article 2 has passed with a clear 2/3. Motion to adjourn has been made, seconded. All in favor?